Welcome back to the Movement Professional Podcast. I'm Dr. Chris Ladd. So today we're going to continue on our series of short podcasts called Common Misconceptions. Today we're going to discuss weight loss. Now, weight loss is most likely the most common complaint or goal that I have from a new client coming in, is that's why they want to get into exercise. That's why they want to start thinking about their health, is they feel like they need to lose some weight. Sometimes this is for aesthetic purposes, where they just don't like the way they look. They don't like the way that others look at them. But often it can be they went to their physician and their physician told them they need to lose some weight because it's connected to some negative health markers such as high blood sugar or high cholesterol, high blood pressure, etc., things that would be more sinister for long-term health. So regardless, weight loss is very important from a health perspective, and many people have that goal to lose weight. Okay, so the misconceptions that I tend to see is clients tend to simplify the process, and one of the most common things I hear is, "I know what to do, I'm just not doing it." Most likely, there's more you can know, and I think that's really important because oftentimes the idea is, okay, I just need to eat less and I need to exercise more. And there's quite a bit more to it there. So the first misconception that I see from a lot of people is that only calories matter. And calories do certainly matter. And the idea of a caloric deficit is ultimately what we need to find in order to lose weight. But how we get there is way more complex than eating less. So thinking that only calories matter doesn't take into account, one, how hard it is for an individual to do that on a consistent basis, to eat less than what they are currently eating on a consistent basis, and that there are things at play that are involved with the amount that we're eating connected to the quality of food that we're eating that make it much easier to consume less over a long period of time. There's also the other side of the equation, the energy outside of the equation, that if we're eating less successfully, sometimes our metabolism will balance that out and we will actually burn less calories as energy and store more as fat just because we're eating less. So we have to appreciate that. What does it take to actually use the calories that we're taking in for energy, and what signals could we be giving our body that would tell the body to store it as fat? And that is certainly not simple. All right, so just exercising more and just eating less is not all there is to it by any means. And I see this with clients throughout my career, is that there's plenty of people that are eating way less than I'd be eating, and eating what would be considered too little in many ways, but they're still not losing weight. And this goes to this idea that you get too low with your caloric intake, the other side of the equation starts to fight back, and we have to now have a way of affecting that side of the equation, namely your basal metabolic rate. So when we look at the basal metabolic rate, it's basically how much of the caloric intake are you using towards energy while you're at rest. And if the higher that is, the better the situation is for weight loss. And it's the biggest part of the equation on the energy outside of the equation. So the other parts of the energy outside of the equation are how much exercise we're doing. So that would be purposeful exercise, burning calories, also just non-purposeful exercise. So how much we're just moving and not being still throughout the course of the day is another small piece of that pie. And then finally, the thermic effect of food, which would be when we eat food, certain foods will actually create more of a caloric burn than others, protein being the number one. But a lot of those sides of the equation, especially the thermic effect of food, just tells you it's a little bit better to eat protein, but it's usually negligible when we're actually making change to weight. Non-exercise activity is important because it gives us an idea that even if we are somebody who's very active with exercise, if the rest of our day is filled with stillness, which is pretty common nowadays, that even people that are active, going to the gym a couple hours a day, they might be sitting for the rest of that day or very still for the rest of that day. That still has a negative effect on the energy outside of the equation. So outside of our exercise, we also want to be aware of how often we're still and try to limit that as much as we can. But ultimately, this basal metabolic rate is like a huge part of that pie. So we have to think about how do we optimize that, and how do we gear our exercise to optimize basal metabolic rate, not to just burn calories while we're exercising. If we think of burning calories while we're exercising as the ideal for weight loss, we're going to be barking up the wrong tree, and we're going to be wasting our time in many ways. And I see this over and over again. So basically what that looks like is, if the intention is to lose weight, so the only thing I want to do is do the exercises that make me burn the most amount of calories in the least amount of time, which tends to look like higher intensity cardiovascular exercise or moderate intensity cardiovascular exercise that you can do for longer. All right, so if you were just on a piece of cardiovascular equipment, you can actually see the calories you're burning in that moment, or if you're wearing a chest strap heart rate monitor, you can see the calories you're burning in any workout that you're doing. If you're doing a true strength training workout, what you're going to find is you work really hard when you're lifting a heavy weight for maybe 1 to 5 reps, and then you put that down, and then you're going to rest in between sets. You're going to do that again. By the end of that workout, you probably didn't burn that many calories, but you actually did quite a bit of work, and that work was valuable to get you stronger. If you go on an elliptical and you go at a nice pace for 20, 30 minutes, you're going to burn way more calories than you did strength training. So what that makes people do when they have a weight loss goal is they say, like, I'm wasting my time strength training because for that time that I just put in there, I could have burnt so many more calories if I'm on a treadmill or I'm on an elliptical or any other continuous movement that you can get your heart rate up for a longer period of time and keep that up for a long period of time. So unfortunately, now that's still valuable for other reasons. Be it cardiovascular exercise, I'm certainly not trying to take that away from people. There's tons of value to it. But if you make that the prime goal for weight loss, you're leaving a lot on the table, because what will optimize your metabolism are things like having more muscle in your body and having more abilities, having more ability to move faster, having more power, being versatile and being better at things, for lack of a better way to say it, will optimize your metabolism way more than doing the same thing over and over again and trying to maximize how many calories you burn in one workout. All right, because it's not about the workout, it's about the rest of the day and how much your body is optimized for using the energy that you will bring in and using that as fuel as opposed to storage in the form of fat. All right, so that's so important. So making your workouts versatile and trying to think about exercise as a way of getting better at more things, as opposed to as a way of maximizing calorie burn. One of the most important things in my experience for weight loss, and it does not make intuitive sense to many people, right? So I think in the long run, you have to be patient with your weight loss goals, which is also a huge misconception until it's actually talked out a little bit, right? Oftentimes people will have weight loss goals and they will just want to see the weight come off quickly. So they'll do some maybe extreme things because they're not looking at what happens when you actually do lose that weight. How do you maintain it? How do you keep it on for life? So anything you do that's really acute, you have to have some type of strategy for maintenance there, or in the long run of your health, it's going to be relatively useless. All right, you may gain some information about how to lose weight, but again, if that can't be sustained, you need more information to ask another question of, all right, how can I do this for a long period of time? So patience is also connected to what we're talking about with building metabolism. Is you want to start the process of having an active lifestyle, and in that active lifestyle, you want to try to optimize as many attributes as you can from a fitness perspective. And that will basically optimize as many attributes as you can from a functional perspective. All right. So if you're stronger, you can move faster, you can go longer. In the long run, that improves metabolism way more than just spending time focusing only on cardiovascular exercise. On top of that, let's say we just do have a majority of our work coming from cardiovascular exercise. Getting better at cardiovascular exercise will help your metabolic process. Getting better doesn't mean just doing the same routine and just trying to optimize how many calories you're burning in that workout. What getting better looks like is, let's say I'm doing the elliptical and I want to do it for 30 minutes. Well, initially I was only able to do it at a wattage of, say, 15, and now I can do it at a wattage of 20, right? Having some type of increase in your performance is going to connect to a better basal metabolic rate. So making that the goal, and there are so many different ways to make that the goal, and most of the time it doesn't look like just doing the same routine. Because as we do the same routine, our body adapts to that routine. It gets kind of easy, and oftentimes that's what we're looking for, is just this idea of, I don't want to think too hard. I just want to get into a routine and say, I'm checking my box, I got my exercise in. All right, I did that. How come I'm not losing weight? Well, oftentimes it's because with anything that you get better at, you have to progress with it gradually over time. So they have to have metrics for looking at where you're at currently so you can see those change over time. So having those metrics with different forms of exercise and seeing kind of all boats rise becomes a really useful strategy for weight loss. But again, it takes some time, it takes some patience, because in order to make changes to all these different attributes, you're going to have to do that over time. All right. So be willing to be patient with your weight loss program and be willing to think of it in the long term, because any gain that you get is only useful if it's able to be sustained throughout your life. With that being said, that doesn't mean that there's one plan. If something was successful for weight loss at any one point, even if you were patient with it, it's the gaining of information that oftentimes becomes the most important part of the weight loss journey. Is, what did you do in any process that was successful? What have you done that was unsuccessful? Right? So building that up, gathering data about yourself. How much am I eating right now that actually was successful? When I hit a plateau, what can I do differently? What are my baselines now, so I know what I can change if I have a goal to change? Right? So oftentimes we just think this could be a weight gain discussion where we're trying to put mass on, but we still have to have an idea of how much we're consuming at any one moment. We have to have an idea of what our baseline numbers are for strength, for power, for endurance. And I've done podcasts on how we can look at that, but just the idea of finding that versatility and thinking of your exercise as a way to get better at things, not just a way to move to burn calories. So important to just switch that mindset. And again, that would be a huge misconception that I see. Other podcasts I've done on misconceptions, one of the common threads that we tend to find is that when it comes to health and fitness, there tends to be this notion that I got to work harder, and the harder I work, the more I'll gain. And in this case, gain might mean lose, where you're losing weight, but I'll get more results by working harder. And I think, again, in this case with weight loss, that really is a fallacy, because one of the other tie-ins to basal metabolic rate, outside of how much we're actually versatile with our movement and versatile with our fitness, how much muscle we have in our body compared to how much fat we have in our body, is how well do we rest so that we allow our body to use the energy and grow with our training. All right. So if we are in a state of stress on a regular basis, we're not sleeping well, we're working too many hours, our body's going to be closer to a state of fight or flight. That state of fight or flight tends to promote more of an increase in cortisol. And what that tends to do is tell us that we need to store energy because we're in danger. So storage of energy gives us a little bit more to work with if we're in a state of threat, right? So this tends to be how the way that the body works in response to threat, especially chronic threat, is that it'll actually have us store more energy in the form of fat as opposed to use that energy. So if we appreciate that, then we have to know that it's just as important to get good sleep and to control our stress levels when it comes to weight loss as it is to work hard and try to burn calories, or work hard in a diligence to try to eat less and try to have the optimal program for nutrition. So we just have to make sure that we appreciate how valuable that is. And I see that more and more, that the missing link for those people that are really working quite hard, they're doing everything you can ask them to do. Laziness is not the issue. And I find that laziness is another misconception I see in weight loss, that when we see somebody that's overweight, the culture may think, okay, there's some laziness there, but very rarely have I ever seen that in my clinical experience. Whereas oftentimes people are doing things that you wouldn't want them to do. They're watching what they eat, they're exercising a lot. They just don't have the idea of how to optimize this basal metabolic rate. So their exercise again might be guided more towards, okay, I got to do cardio. Their eating habits might be towards, I got to eat as little as I can. And then they're missing out completely on the stress management piece. And the act of trying to lose weight is stressing them out more. It's a vicious cycle. But they're just not prioritizing and not recognizing how valuable the sleep component is, the stress management component is. And it's really hard to actually convince somebody that doing less will actually help them do more or lose more. And it's because that's what the perception is, that sleeping and doing work that calms you is somehow feeding a narrative of laziness. But ultimately, those are just as valuable as, and they're active parts of the process for weight loss. So hopefully that was useful. This is a very triggering conversation in many ways. To summarize, like the major things to get out of this discussion is that calories certainly matter, a caloric deficit matters. And the more data we have to track how much we're taking in, the macronutrients we're taking in, the micronutrients we're taking in, it's valuable. But many times we're doing all of that and we're still not getting the results we want. And we have to appreciate that the other side of the equation, the energy out, is so valuable and way more complex than people think. So try to switch gears on the mindset of, okay, I just got to put the work in to burn as many calories as I can. I got to spend more time in the gym burning more calories. And think of it more as, what can I get better at? And how many ways can I get better from a physical standpoint? How do I get my strength better? How do I get my power better? How do I improve my endurance? How do I improve my cardiovascular health, with a separate goal being how many calories do I burn while I'm doing cardiovascular exercise? So get better at more things from a fitness standpoint, and your metabolism will respond favorably. And that becomes a huge part of the weight loss equation. And finally, respect rest. Respect the time where you're not in this stress response. That's the time where you're actually allowing your body to feel safe. And then again, the metabolism will respond favorably to that. If you have any questions, you can go to movementprofessional.com. I'll see you next time.